Hello and welcome to Map Dive in About 5 for 3rd grade. Today we are going to focus on place value relationships. My name is Emily Divizio and my partner is
Barbara Knox.
We're actually going to have you work on a task. On the next slide, when you get there, we ask that you please pause the video, complete the task with your partner if you're planning with someone or your grade level team, depending on your situation. And as you're working through that task, I will preface it that it is not a 3rd grade standard to work to the 10,000s place. However, as an adult, we're going to take you a little bit out of your comfort zone to think what it is for a 3rd grader working on this for the first time. But we ask that you reflect on why it is important for students to be able to think flexibly about numbers when working with place value. So as I stated earlier, this actually is not a 3rd grade standard. The 3rd grade standard is to 10,000. But we're going to take you a little bit out of your comfort zone and have you focus on this task as a teacher and feeling what it would be like to be a 3rd grader.
So go ahead and pause the video now and we will see you back in a few minutes.
Welcome back. So hopefully as you worked on this task, you realize that it is important for our students to think flexibly about the numbers because it supports the relationships between powers of 10. And it also helps our students see how to rename those numbers in relationship to the powers of 10.
And understanding that all of those representations are equivalent.
Absolutely. That's very important, that I'm not changing the value of the number. So here we can see with the progression with BEST why we're teaching what we're teaching in 3rd grade and what they've come to us in 2nd with, and then where we're taking them and supporting them for 4th grade as a building block. What I really like about these standards, Barbara, is that what's highlighted there in the gold is obviously 3rd grade, but you can see in 2nd grade and even in 1st grade, they've worked with composing and decomposing numbers.
Right. It starts in 1st grade. They're decomposing and composing 2-digit numbers, 3-digit numbers in 2nd grade, and now in 3rd grade, 4-digit numbers.
And what I really like is that in our math standards, we did do that. However, it wasn't necessarily called out like it is in the BEST standards.
Right.
So with working with place value, we really want to make a conscious effort to use concrete models to build that conceptual understanding. Especially, they're very valuable for showing students that place value digits are related by powers of 10.
Right. It takes 10 of one place value to make 1 of the next place value to the left.
Right. So 10 cubes to make 1 rod, 10 rods to make 1 flat.
And we did start that understanding in 2nd grade using groupable models so they could physically put together and take apart the models, maybe using snap cubes or straws and rubber bands.
Because place value can be a really abstract concept for students. When working with place value, it is really important for us as teachers to facilitate conversations for our students to make that connection between using the pre-made base 10 blocks and connecting that concrete model to a representational model of a student drawing.
With the quick pictures, right? Yeah. And not having to draw out a perfect base 10 block in our picture that a stick can represent that.
Right, we don't need to waste time drawing the pretty picture, yes. But it definitely helps them, and then you can see here, it starts to give them some exposure to that expanded form, which is a little bit more abstract.
Right.
Place value discs are actually a concrete model that may be new to some of us. We're not all necessarily used to using those, but it is important to point out, and I know you want to say it, Barbara.
Yeah, they're non-proportional manipulative. So if I take 10 ones and put them together, it's not the same size as one of the 10s. They're actually, one is the same size as 110, 110 is the same size as 100. The only difference is in the color and the values that are written on those circles. They really have to have a solid understanding of the grouping principle before they can make sense of using a non-proportional manipulative.
Again, place value is very abstract, even though it may not seem it to us as adults. Also, this model, the place value discs, are great when you start getting to work with larger numbers. But again, we're not going to work with those larger numbers until we have sound understanding using the groupable and pre-groupable models.
Right.
So
here in the thousands place, I mean, think about the great big cubes. You probably don't have more than one or two of those in your classroom, if you have any. So at that point, when you get to the thousands place, you really need to start using a non-proportional tool.
And I'm wondering, even to make that transition, comparing the base 10 blocks to the place value disc and having a conversation about the representation and what it looks like.
Yeah,
but again, making the connection here between the concrete model to a student drawing a representational model.
Yes.
So this representation of the place value chart is quite abstract. And we can see here also that it connects to expanded form as well. But what's important to point out is we should not save the place value chart till when we're in abstract land.
Definitely not. If you're using that with the concrete tools and then with the representational pictures, they should be able to make the connection between those three different models, between the concrete, representational, and abstract. So the tool is going to be a support to them when they get to the abstract.
Definitely. Working with place value, there seems to be a lot of student misconceptions with interpreting the zero, if that is one of the digits in a number. So there are some different things that you can do to support students with that misconception.
Or even knowing to put the zero in the number, right? I mean, I might see with place value discs, I have 4,000s, I have 800s, and I have 2 1s. I just write a 3-digit number because I only have 3 place values in front of me.
Makes sense, right? So using those models to build that actual number and then asking the students to record the different place values for each of those numbers, they could see that I have 0 10s, for example, in this particular number.
Right. Anytime that there's an empty place value between 2 place values that I have represented, I need to record a 0 in that place value.
Often, Barbara, we see when we're working with place value that a lot of students may mix up the place values when identifying the numbers, or they may read the numbers incorrectly.
Right. I mean, that number down at the bottom, they might read 700,000, 6 10,000s, 5,000s, and then they know 31, but they don't know how to read those 3 digits at the beginning. I used to take cards and just put 3-digit numbers on several square cards, and students would draw 2 of them and use a comma in between, and they would read, well, I can read this 3-digit number that I have in my hand, but when I put it down here in the thousands period, I'm not sure how to read it. But really, I don't read it any different than I did while it was in my hand. I just have to read that 3-digit number, and the comma after it is going to tell me what period those
represents
3
a
digits
different
are
period,
in.
right? So it definitely takes some practice with that and students actually visually going through that process.
Yes.
Do you remember that task you went through earlier in renaming numbers and thinking about them flexibly? Well, this is actually the grade level standard task that you can use to support students with that misconception and thinking about numbers flexibly. We're taking it out of using base 10 blocks and we're focused on candy in the Candy-O shop and thinking about groups, how many crates and how many boxes do we have and how many rolls does it take to fill up a box and how many singles.
If the company doesn't have enough boxes, how am I going to give the customer what they want without picking up a box, right?
So it's not always necessarily that convenient, but it gets them thinking about different compositions and decompositions of situations based upon crates, boxes, rolls, and singles. Yes. This task is accessible to you and you feel free to use with your students. You can either use the QR scan code at the bottom, and if that's not working for you, we also included a bit.ly link that you can copy and paste into your browser. Here you can see many of the different representations that we've actually talked about in this math dive in about 5. You can see the concrete thinking and the concrete models that are represented, as well as representational thinking where students are actually making a connection to that concrete model through drawing a picture. and then our more abstract thinkers in regards to using the place value chart in expanded form.
But I do like that I'm seeing the place value chart in the concrete and representational also, so we can make those connections back and forth across the islands.
It's also in the abstract.
Yes, it is.
So it's important to point out with this, Barbara, though, that I don't want everyone to think that we have to start at concrete and race to abstract. These islands are definitely fluid. I can bounce from one island to another based upon my understanding with place value and even using a specific manipulative.
Right.
That concludes today's Math Dive at About 5. We hope that you found this session on place value relationships valuable, and we look forward to seeing you at our next section. Have a great day.